Hey guys, we are back. In this video, we are going to see how to export data from a database table to a file. So this is a very common use case which can be applied when we need to create reports. We can schedule our Spring Batch application in order to generate reports periodically. So in Spring Batch, when we deal with the concept of exporting data from database, we automatically gonna use one of the two concepts. The first one is cursor-based item reader, and the second one is the paging item reader. So let's explore and let's see the difference between both of them and when we can use one of them. As always, before going further, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, so you are going to help our channel to grow and will motivate me to make more videos. Let's go. So now let's start with cursor-based item reader implementation, which actually it just uses a JDBC cursor to read data sequentially from database. So before that, let's understand something here. So let's suppose that we have here our table. The name of the table is full. We have 3 columns, the ID, name, and bar. We have our select statement, which actually gonna select all the columns from our table full. And we are going to see the records between 1 to 7, where the ID is greater than 1 and ID is less than 7. So for other database vendors, of course, we could just write it as between. So the result of these rows, when we do that, should be mapped to an object, which is our full object, as we can see here, by using result set. So result set will allow us to map these rows, okay, that we have just extracted from the select statement to an object. We are going to map the rows to an object. This mechanism will be allowed by using result set. So what is a result set? Result set, for those that understand the pure JDBC, we know that the result set is an object that holds the data retrieved from a database query, which allow us to manipulate it later. So as we can just see here, so the result of this query will be mapped, okay, to object using the result set. So result set is helping us, okay, to manipulate each row, okay, as object. Now the question is, what is the cursor here? So in JDBC, a cursor is just a pointer, or better, it's a mechanism that lets you navigate through rows in a result set one by one. So for example, when we call the method next or read, the cursor which was pointing to this line here, this row number 2, okay, going to move to the row number 3. So when it moves to the row number 3, the row number 2 actually now can be collected by garbage collector. Of course, if there is no instance variable, okay, maintaining the reference of it. So we are going to do it for each row. Every time when we call the next, we are going to point our cursor to the next row, okay? And of course, the object will be allowed to be collected by garbage collector. So now, what are the key features of this approach called by cursor-based item reader? So as we can see here, the cursor-based item reader allow us to read data, okay, in a streaming fashion, which means that it opens a cursor and iterates it over the result set, as I was just telling you here. And also we can use it, for example, if we want to maintain the memory usage, right? As I was telling you guys, that once we move to another row, the last object, okay, will be allowed to be collected by garbage collector. So we will not hold the objects at once in memory. And also, for example, in case of performance, we can use it, and also transaction handling. So before diving deep into more detailed functionality about cursor-based item reader, let's code, let's see in practice, and then we are going to come back to the theory and we will understand a little bit more about the cursor-based item reader. So let's go. So let's start creating our project. So let's go to start.spring.io. So now let's create our group. Now we create our artifact. In our case, let's just call it by export sales. and we are going to use the Java 21, and our building will be Maven, and yeah, the version, it doesn't matter. And now we start adding our dependencies. The first dependency, as always, is the Spring Batch, because it's our purpose here. And the next one, we are going to use also the Spring Data JPA, because Spring Batch, as always, it needs also the job repository, right? If you don't understand the job repository, just go back to our videos and you will understand it better. So once we have the JPA dependency, the next dependency that we need to add, for example, is our database vendor. For this one, we are going to use Postgres, but you can use MySQL, SQL Server, Mongo, whatever you want. And yeah, I think in terms of dependencies, this is what we have. Let's just generate our project, and I'm coming back once I have it on my IntelliJ. So now that we are here on our IntelliJ, so let's take a look on our POM XML in order to understand our dependencies. And yeah, I think we also need, for example, the Lombok. Okay, let's just add Lombok dependency here, just like that. Okay, so we have the Lombok here. Yeah, I think that's okay. And for example, here in the building section, I'm just going to move from another project, and I'm going to paste here some plugins. So this is what we have in terms of plugins. So just adding, for example, here the Lombok, and yeah, this is what we have in terms of dependencies and configuration. Let's just reload our project, and I think everything is okay. So if we just go here and let's explore the folder, okay, everything is work as expected. So now, as we are going to export, right, data from database to a file or Kafka, we are going to see, but I think it's going to be to a file, because we have already example using Kafka. The next thing that we need to do is start creating our, let's say, schema, right? Our tables and database and so on. So for example, I'm just going to create here the schema.sql. So for example, for now, the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to drop table if exists. The name of our table will be sales. All right, let's just create here our table. Let's call it by sales. What we are going to have in our table, it will be let's say sale ID. And the next thing that we are going to have is a product. Let's just add it as a product ID, because I don't want to specify every single product. So it will be an int, just like that. And let's put it not now also. Yeah, we need the customer ID. And also, for example, we need, let's just put here something like a sale date, just like that, which will be, for example, here in our case will be a date. Okay, we are going to have also the sale amount. I don't think it's very nice to put sale amount here and so on, but it doesn't matter. It's just for example. So it will be a numeric. Let's just put here 10, and let's say like this, not null also. The next column that we are going to add here, for example, for our sale, we need to indicate also, for example, the store location. So the store location actually will be a varchar, and we can just put here, for example, 100, and let's put here also not null. And I think also, so store location, we need also, for example, the country. Yeah, I think it's okay. I can just add here another column, which will be more about a technical column, okay, which will be the processed column, okay. So I'm just going to use it as a boolean, just like that, and let's say not null. And yeah, I think that's okay for now. Alter table, and let's alter the column. So column processed, the default value will be false. Of course, I could use it here, right? Telling it that, okay, we are just going to set the default value of processed as false because this is a technical column that will allow us to see if the record has been exported or not. Okay, so just remember, I could use it here in a single statement, but let's just put it here. Let's start inserting some values. So we are going to insert the product ID, the customer, the sale date, the sale amount, the store location, and the country. And yeah, for now, let's add the values. So here the value, I think, okay, let's just put here some random values. So let me just make it quickly because we are planning to insert, okay, too many data. So I'm just going to add more, and I will be back once I have all the values, okay, for our insert statement. So we are back here. I just add some comments here. For example, this is our create and so on. So here we have our 1,000 records, okay, that we have inserted on our sales table. As you can see here, Setúbal, so this is the store location, Portugal is the country, Los Angeles is store location, the country is USA, Luanda is the location, Angola is the country, Nigeria, England, Russia, China, Ukraine, Kenya, and so on. So we have here records that will allow us to play with it, okay? So now let's go here on our application property. Let's start configuring our database using the data source. So as always, a very simple thing is to use the Spring data source and specify the username, the password, and the URL. So in our case, the username is gonna be root, and let's use also for the password gonna be root also, and Spring that data source that URL will be JDBC, as we are using Postgres, so we need to specify that it's the PostgreSQL, and as we are running on our local machine, it's gonna be a local host. And the port is, I think, is 5432, and here we specify the database, which in our case is sales info. So this is the simple configuration for our data source, and I would like to add here some more properties. For example, I would like to tell the Spring JPA to use Hibernate DDL auto, so it will be create and drop, because I want to create or drop the application based on its running or its tapping. And yeah, now the next thing that I would like to do is I want, once we run our application, Spring Batch should be able to perform, okay, or to execute this schema. So in that order, it's very simple. So let's just use Spring SQL.init mode, right? And it will be always. And yeah, I think I can also add here, for example, the Spring data.jdbc. No, it should be JPA. No, it should be jdbc.dialect. Okay, I want to be PostgreSQL, just like this. Now, the next thing is just we need some batch configurations. So in that order, let's use Spring Batch. The first thing that I would like to say, okay, Spring Batch, don't stop, okay, the job once I run the application, because as we are going to schedule our application, we don't want it to run just once we run the application. We want it to run periodically based on some schedule. For example, every day at 11, okay? So that's why I'm putting it false, because we don't want to run our application once we trigger the run. So yeah, that's why I put it here as a false. And next thing I would like to add here is, for example, to use the Spring JDBC, of course, and say to initialize the schema, and let's say it should be always. So what does it mean? If you remember, guys, Spring Batch contains it's not only, right, the schema that we are talking about, it's not this one, but the schema that I'm talking about here is about the Spring Batch infrastructure. So we have a concept called by job repository. So job repository in Spring Batch contains some tables that will allow us to save let's say the metadata related to our job. if you want to see the schema that we are going to initialize here, you can just go here, for example, on our dependencies. Oops. So if you just look for batch, you will see that we have here some schemas, okay, for all kind of, I think the most kind of database vendors. So in our case, we are going to use the Postgres one. So as you can see, we have here some tables that it will create, okay, once we say it like that. Of course, it's not the best approach, because if you are going to production, maybe you need to add some more, let's say, database migration tools, such as Liquibase, Flyway, or something like that, okay? So for this example, we can just use it like that. It will work as expected. So yes, I think this is all that we need in order to configure. So now let's go to the code. Yeah, let's start configuring our job. So the first thing that we are going to do is, let's just create here a package called by config, and here we are going to create our job configuration. So export sales job config, and here of course we need to specify that it's a configuration class, and also we need to annotate it as enable batch processing. So when we use this configuration, actually we can, for example, here add some more, let's say, config. For example, we can set the data source, the transaction manager, and so on. So going back here on our use case, we can see that we need to get data from our database. So in that order, we need to use a specific item reader, okay? So in our case, we are going to use the JDBC cursor. Yeah, so now let's start creating our JDBC cursor item reader. So as always, let's just use what Spring Batch offers us. For example, the JDBC cursor item reader, it receives a type, the type that will allow us to manipulate the rows that we are going to extract from our database. So for this particular one, let's just say that we are going to map, okay, the result of our query to a object called by sales. Yeah, I think sales DTO, just like that. And let's create our method just like this. And here, let's just, for instance, return, okay, a new JDBC cursor item reader builder, just like this. Let's say that here we are going to receive a sales DTO, just like that. And now the first thing that we need to do to add a name, sales reader, just like that. The next thing that we need to do, also we need to add a data source. So for our particular case, let's just inject here our data source, just like that. It's complaining because I could just add a construct injection, but I think Lombok is very nice and can add it for us by using the annotation required as constructor, just like this. So now that we have here our data source, let's use the data source here. And yeah, the next thing that we need to do, I think, yeah, let's create our SQL. The SQL will be actually your statement, okay, your SQL statement. So let's just call it by SQL. It's gonna be a string, and here we are going to select, let's say, yeah, we are going to select all of these fields, right? Because this is the one that we want to export, okay? Then we say from the name of our table, which is sales, right? The name of our table. Yeah, I think we also need to say, okay, where processed, I think it's like that. So where processed, okay, is equal false. Why we are doing it? Because we just want to export, okay, the data that haven't been processed yet, okay. Yeah, and here we had our SQL, and now we can, for example, use here the fetch size. So the fetch size is just how many data, right, we are going to fetch. For example, here we can just say 100. Let's just give an example. And now this is where we start thinking. Okay, so let me just first create here, Okay, let's create it as a record. Yeah, just like this. And let's create in a package called by DTO. And if we take a look, yeah, here we can see that we have here our sales DTO, and here we start adding, for example, all the values that we have there. So sale ID, we have also, I think, yeah, let me just split it and put it in this side. Okay, and we go back here. For example, here we can just say, okay, we are going to add the product ID also. We can, for example, add also the customer ID, which can be a long. Yeah, let me just add, yeah, just like that. So as you can see, okay, we have all the fields that we need. Let me just go and let's use it as a presentation mode. So yeah, I think using presentation mode is better. So now that we have here our SQL, we have our object that we are going to map the result of our query to a Java object. And here is, I think we just need the Rowmapper. So the Rowmapper, okay, will actually map, as we were talking about the result set. Let's just go back here on our presentation, and we can see, for example, here that once we have the result of our query, right, we are going to use the result set, okay, to map these rows, okay, to a Java object. So in that order, the class that we are going to use in order to map will be the data, yeah, will be this one, data class Rowmapper, and this will just, for example, receive our sales DTO that class, just like this, okay? And here we can just say the build. Of course, you can keep playing with some other configurations. For example, we can add some other property, save state, you understand it, we can use whatever we want, okay, max rows and so on. So this is the simple way to create your JDBC cursor item reader. So remember guys, when I was telling you guys about the cursor based implementation, we have this one JDBC cursor item reader, which is the one that we are using here, right? And we have also the other one, which is the Hibernate cursor item reader, which is deprecated nowadays, okay? We have also store procedure, so you can use one of them, okay? All of them are the cursor based item reader, and you can use one of them for your particular use case, okay? We are using the JDBC cursor item reader, as we can see here, JDBC cursor item reader. So here, as always, we just add it as a bin. So now that we have our reader, right? If we go back to our presentation, we have our reader, we just need our processor, which actually I think it's optional, so we are not going to do anything, but you could just use your processor, okay? And I think, yeah, let's use our processor, and then we are going to create our writer. So if you remember, a Spring Batch step, okay, contains the reader, the processor, which is optional, and a writer. Go to our channel and you will see some other videos related to Spring Batch itself. So here, let's just create our processor, just like this. It's very simple. Here, our processor will be a sales processor, just like that, which implements the item processor, just like that, which will receive the sales DTO and will return a sales DTO, because we are just playing, right? So let's create this as a component because I want to inject it automatically, and I don't think it's necessary. And let's implement the method, okay, just like that. And here, for example, let's just log, okay, so for example, log that info, we get the log, for example, in our case from the Lombok, okay, self4j, and here we can just say, okay, processing the item, and here we specify the item that we are going to process, that we are processing. So the processor is very nice because we can just filter, right? For example, if sales is from, let's suppose that if the sales is from Russia, we can just return null, else we are going to return sales. So just like that. Okay, I don't mean Russian. Let's say if I think the name. Okay, now let's see. Let's just use USA the first time in our life. So if United States let's say equals ignoring case, okay, the item that let's say get country, okay, we are not going to process, so we are filtering, okay, we are filtering all sales that are from United States. No, I think oh yeah, just for an example, okay. So else we return the sale itself. So what does it mean? So when we use the processor is very nice when we are planning to implement some filtering, aggregation, our business logic, okay, we do it, or some validation, okay, we do it on the item processor. It's very nice. Here, just for example, we are not going to process, or we are not going to write, or we are not going to export, okay, the items from United States, okay. And yeah, here we're just going to inject our sales processor, just like that. Yeah, it's okay. Now that we have our reader, we have our processor, and the question here, maybe people would say, okay, by Sensei, why you wrote your own processor in a separate class? Guys, I have been telling you guys, I could write also my reader to a separate class, but it doesn't make sense because I'm just using some pre-defined, right, classes or helpers that Spring Batch offers to me. I don't have to test this because they have tested it already. I don't need to make it on a separate class, make some unit testing for this because it's from the framework, okay? You could do that, but in my own perspective, on my own opinion, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, now that we have the reader, we have the processor, this is the time that we need our writer. So if we go back to our, let's say, use case, we have the reader, we have the processor. Now we need the writer. The writer is just a file. So we're just going to create a flat file item writer or something like that. So let's go. So here, let's create our writer. The first thing that we need to do is, okay, let's use the one that Spring Batch already offers to us, our flat file item writer, which actually will write all the, let's say, records that we are going to receive, right, from processor, okay, and we are going to write it to a file. So let's just say sales DTO, and here let's just say, okay, flat file item writer. So just like that. And here we start building our flat file. So new flat file item writer. So let's put here the sales DTO, just like that. And here we specify the name. The name is very important. So you just say it like that. It's a writer. And here, yeah, the first thing that we need when we are writing something is the resource, right? We need the file that we are going to write. So let's just add here a new file system resource. Now here is the question, guys. Do you have to hard code, for example, let's say sales.csv like that? Maybe yes, but we are going to improve it, okay? But let's just go further. And what we need here, we are going to say, okay, our file will be the limit, right? And we need to specify also the delimiter. For our particular CSV, it will be a semicolon. And also we need to say the source type. This is just the sales, right? The sales that, yeah, that class. So the source type, the one that we are going to use, right? The fields mapped from the object, okay, in order to write to our file. And here we need to specify the names, right? So the names that we are going to get from our, let's say, our source, right? And the names are those one that we have there. So I think sales ID we don't need, but we are going to need the product ID, the customer ID, the sale date, and so on. So in that order, we can just like this, the names that we are going to, okay, right, the customer ID, the next one is sale date, yeah, just like that. So I'm just trying to make it more, but as we can see, okay, we have all the fields that we have here, okay, the country, the store location, and so on. So going back here on our sales flat file item writer, yeah, sales file writer, yeah, it can be like this. So we have the names, and yeah, we can, for example, add here, for example, this setting here. So for example, if we set it to true, actually, okay, it will delete the file if it's empty, just as the name says. So for example, we can also still playing, for example, if we combine for example, the append, okay, with this one here. So if we say, okay, append is true, okay, and what will happen here is, for example, if let's say if the file already exists and it contains some lines, okay, next time when we trigger our job, it will append, okay, the new lines to the existing file. Should delete if empty, right, is nice because it will delete the file if empty. And for example, we have also should delete file if exists. So this is the one I was mistaken. This is the one that, for example, if you set it to true, it will delete the file if it exists, okay? So if we have a file there, it will delete it. So guys, I'm just trying to explore, but we want to make it faster. And yeah, let's just use here the build. It's very nice, I think. One more thing that I can, for example, give you guys is once we are writing to a file, sometimes we need the header of the file in order to indicate all these columns, right, in the file, because the person that the person that will receive the file to explore should understand what each record mean, okay? In that order, for example, we can add here, for example, the header of a file, okay, which in our case we can just, for example, say here the header, yeah, we can just, for example, say, okay, header that I think, yeah, let's just add here, okay? So it will indicate the header of file. So, and you can also add the footer, okay, and so on. So guys, explore, it's very nice. So let's finish it. Let's create it as a bin, okay? It's nice like that. Now that we have the reader, the writer, and the processor, this is the place that we start creating our step. So now let's create our step. So let's use here the step. We can just give, for example, the name of the step, let's say from sales table to file, okay, just like that for now. And here let's just return new step builder. So if you remember, in the previous versions of the Spring Batch, the previous version of Spring Batch before Spring Batch 5, I think, you should use the step builder factory and job builder factory, but for now, or nowadays with the new version, we don't need it anymore, okay? We can just use the new step builder, and we give here the name. So the name, we are just going to say, okay, from DB to file, just like that, and later you can do refactoring for it. And then it receives also a job and it receives also a job repository. So let's just inject here our job repository just like this, and here we specify the job repository just like this, and then here is the place that we start telling, okay, it will be a chunk. Okay, so just like that, we are going to receive a sales DTO, and we are going to return a sales DTO. Here we say that it's a chunk processing. Remember guys, in previous video in our channel we specified difference between chunk processing and tasklet. So here in our case it will be just chunk oriented processing, and here the chunk size will be for now 10. And as we can see, we need also to use a platform transaction manager. So in that order we are going to inject it also here just like that. And now here we specify the transaction manager like that. So now we start building our step, which contains a reader. In our case, the reader, we can just specify the sales JDBC cursor item reader like this. And here we say the processor. We have created our processor, which is this one here. Let me just organize the code like this. Okay, and now here, as we injected the processor, okay, we're just going to add here the processor, and then we need to specify the writer for now. So our writer is a flat file item writer. So just like that. So flat file item writer. And I think, yeah, for now it's okay. Let's just make it build, and let's create our step also as a bin. So now that we have our step, we need to create our job. So the job we are going to create the same way. So let's just create job db to file job just like that. And yeah, so the job also we just instantiate it using the job builder. We specify also a name. So now that we have the name, the job itself also needs the job repository, right? And yeah, so we have here the job repository, and we can, for example, just start using our step. In our case is this one here. We have different ways to put it. We could just call it by adding it like that, or we could, as it is a bin, right, we could just pass it as argument here in this method and add it, okay, like that. So having it like this, and I think, yeah, the next thing that we need to do is we can just yeah, build the job like that. I think people will say like, okay, but you can also add some other parameters, and like, for example, incrementer, right? So just like that, we could use something like that, right? So it's also acceptable. So we have here our job, we create our job, and let's just annotate it as a bin. So far so good, guys. Now the next thing that we need to think about is we can start improving, or we need actually to trigger our job. As I was telling you guys, if you don't specify this flag here, which is job enabled, once we run our application, the job will start and will end. So we are going to start up the container, the application, and it will process, it will trigger the job, and it will turn off the job. Okay, so the application will shut down. So in order to allow us to, for example, trigger our job automatically using a cron, okay, periodically, we need to create our job launcher. So in that order, let me just go here, for example, yeah, let me create here a new folder. Let's call it by scheduler, just like this. And here we are going to create our job scheduler. So our job scheduler, it will be also a component, okay? So I think this is the place that we are going to trigger our job. So in that order, let's just create here a new method, trigger. In this method, as the name suggests, we are going to trigger our job. In order to trigger a job, we need to use the job launcher from Spring Batch. So in that order, I'm just going to inject here the job launcher, okay, from Spring Batch, which allow us to launch our job. As you can see, we could once again inject it using the constructor injection, but for me, I think it's better to use the Lombok required args constructor, which will inject our job launcher. So now that we have our job launcher, now let's start adding some parameters. Here we are going to use the job parameters builder, just like this. So now having here the job parameter builder, here we can start adding, for example, some stuff. For example, we can add some keys, okay? For example, we can just add a key which will say, okay, the day, okay, or the time that it was processed, okay? In this case, we can just add here. Here, it should not be a string. For example, here we can add a new date as parameter. And here we can just say, okay, new date, which actually will say, okay, it was processed, okay, on this date or something like that. But when we use, for example, the job parameter, it's very nice to, for example, inject some configuration or some, in order to give some indication to our job. For example, let's take a look here on our job. We are hard coding here, right, the file that we are going to write. What if, for example, we can just pass the name of the file, okay, here in job parameter, and then get the name of the file that we just passed there once we launch the job, okay, here. So what I mean is, for example, let's just create here a new parameter. For example, let's add as a string, okay, and here we are going to say, okay, the name of the parameter will be output that file, for example, that name, just like that. And here is the place that we are going to add the file name. So for example, we can create our file name as, let's just use it like that. Our file name we can create, for example, as we are going to trigger, for example, in our particular case, every single day, we can just use, for example, the local date. Yeah, if it's every single day, it can just be local date that now, right now, because it will be the time that we are going to trigger the job. And here we can just say, okay, to string, and we can, for example, concat, okay, for example, sales.csv, okay. So this will be the name of our file. So it will be the name of the day that we are going to process the file, okay, underscore CSV. And here we passed, okay, as value the file name. So what I'm telling here is, okay, once I launch my job, okay, I want to add some parameter. So my job can have access of all parameter that I will add here. So having it like that, just in order to make it very simple, let's just use two job parameters like that. And now that we have the parameters, let's use this job launcher, okay, and let's launch our job. So the job launcher, as you can see, this one here has a method, okay, which is run, and here we are going to run. It needs a job, okay, so let's inject here our job. So just like that. So let's inject our job. We could just, for example, leave it like that. Why? Because we only have one job in all our application, okay, all configuration, we only have this job here. But for, let's say, in order to make it clear, okay, let's just use the correct name, and here let's just use the DB, okay, just like that, and add the job parameters just like this. So it will throw an exception, as we can see, okay, but instead of, for example, add the exception, all of them here as throw, right? in our method, okay, we can just use, for example, here at sneaky throws from Lombok. Yeah, I think this is all that we need, but as I was telling you guys, in order to trigger it, we need to schedule. Okay, so let's use the scheduled. Okay, we are going to use the cron expression. You could use, for example, the fixed delay, the fixed rate. Okay, we have video explaining the fixed delay and the fixed rate. Okay, but for this particular case, we are going to use a cron, and we are going to say, okay, our job will run for every let's say, yeah, 30 seconds. I think we can later make it better. Yes, and we can say that, okay, we can, for example, run from let's say from Monday, right, to I think, yeah, Saturday or something like that. Okay, but you can, for example, say, okay, now we are just going to run our job every single day. Okay, you could do, for example, from Monday to Friday or something like that. But we are just going to run every single day because someone can just grab the code and will not understand that it's Sunday and the job will not run. So it will run every 30 seconds, but of course it's just in order to make it an example. But let's not forget, when you use at scheduled, you need to enable also, okay, the scheduling at enable scheduling, like that. Now let's go back. We have here this output file that name. So what we can do here, instead of using it like a noob, okay, like a junior developer like this, Spring Batch or Spring Boot contains a, let's say, feature called by late binding. So as we want to use, right, this parameter, we can use the late binding feature of Spring Boot or Spring Batch. And here, how we gonna access that value? So in order to access that value, we can just use here at value. Oops, my bad. Remember guys, it should be at value, not from Lombok, but from Spring, okay, from old Spring framework bin factory annotation. Okay, don't use the Lombok one, but this one here. And here is the place that we are going to say, okay, now Spring, I want to go, okay, to the job parameters, okay, and I want to access actually, okay, this particular parameter here that we have, this param that we have here. Okay, so just like this, and I'm gonna say, okay, now that I have the access of this param, it's a string, okay, and I can just call it by, for example, output file, just like that. Okay, output file. So let me just put it here in order to make it better. Okay, we're just using the annotation and we are telling, okay, I'm going to the job parameters, okay, and I'm going to access the actually file name, and instead of creating here hard-coded, okay, I'm just going to use here the name of the file, just like that. So I think I have it like that. The other thing that I should tell you guys is that when you use, okay, when you use the late binding like that, okay, your processor, or let's say your writer, your reader, okay, should have the scope, okay, step, okay, or step scope or job scope. But in our case, we should tell, okay, this flat file item writer, in order to access this, okay, it should be the step scope, just like this. Now what we need to do is we just need to say, okay, we are going to inject, let me just copy the name of our job, okay, instead of using it like that, I'm just going to tell, okay, so for my particular step, it will contain a, let's say, it will receive as argument the flat file item writer, okay, and I'm going to use here, okay, the flat file item writer, just like that. And yeah, I think for this particular case, I think we have everything, guys. So yeah, we have here our job. Now I think the next thing that we need in order to run our application, I think we need the Docker Compose, because we don't have yet the container running the Postgres and so on. So let's add it. So let me just show you guys here. Okay, here I have my Docker Compose file, and yeah, so just like that. So in my Docker Compose I just have the Postgres because I had some other images, but for this video I just edit here. I just have the Postgres image here, okay, and yeah, so as you can see, and the database, actually the one that we are going to use, okay, in order to persist our data. So having it like that, let me just jump to my terminal. So now that I'm here on my terminal, let's just run using the Docker Compose. Now we have our Postgres running. Yeah, we have our Postgres container running. And I think the next thing that I would like to do, let's just configure the client, okay, for Postgres. And in that order, let me just exit this one here. Let's go here on database. You can use, I think, Postgres admin or something like that. But for me, I like to use it on my IntelliJ. It's integrated. So let's just look for Postgres here. Postgres. So let's just use here the Postgres. As we can see, the database will be sales info. If you remember, this is our database here. Okay. And yeah, the username will be root, the password also root. And yes, I think let's just test the connection. All right, it's working. Now this is the time that we should, for example, run our application, and let's see what's happening here. All right, our application is up, and yes, so let's just take a look, for example, here on our schedule. Remember, I put it every 30 seconds, okay, but you can just use it better. So we have an exception, but okay, this column names, okay, it doesn't matter, but for now let's just take a look on our tables here. Let's just go here, and for example, yeah, here we can see the tables. So as I was telling you guys, the spring, right, remember, let's go back here, batch, yes, here, and we can see, of course, we can see here, right, we have here the schema for Postgres, and we can see that we have some tables that it should create. The job execution, as we can see here, the job execution, we have the job execution params, we have here, and yeah, that's all. And I think, let me just reload it. Yes, I think we have here also our, let's say, our table, which is the one that we have created. Let me just put it here down because it's becoming a mess. Yes, so this is the table, right, that we have here, and if we see, we have inserted, right, some values. So some values, and if we take a look here on, for example, select all from table, we will see that we have our records there. Okay, now let's go and let's fix the exception because it's giving us an exception. The column name sale ID was not found in result set. Yo guys, it's still making sense. We have the result set that I was telling you guys, which is an object that will allow us to manipulate the result of our query. Yeah. So let's go back here on our, let's go back here on our JDBC cursor item reader, and we can see that we didn't specify here, right, the sale ID. So let's start our application and let's run once again. So now let's run once again our application now that we have add here, and let's see. All right, now it's processing. As we can see, we are processing everything. okay, as you can see here. So where is this log? This log is on our sales, right, processor. So if we just go here on our sales processor, we are logging that we are processing the item, right, processing the item, sales, blah blah blah, the amount, and so on. But remember, on our sales processor, so when we use Spring Batch, the processor is the place that you are going to use your filter, your business logic, your validation, and so on. Okay, so what we are doing here is very simple. I was telling you guys, it's very simple. So if the country name is equals to United States, okay, we will not write in the file, okay, in the final file. So let's take a look here. I think, what is our file? Let me just refresh it. Okay, now we can see here on our file, we can see that we have everything that we were just writing. So as I was telling you guys, here on our processing, we are not writing anything related to United States. So if we take a look here on our file, let's use the states. There is not states, USA, nothing related to USA. But if you remember, we have, right, if we go here on the logs, we have United States, right? But we are not writing them in the file because we just specify here on our sales processor that we are not writing anything related to USA. So this is the filter, okay? This is very nice way to think about the item processor. And yes, so let's take a look here on our file. As we can see, the name of the file is the name, the date, right? So what is the name of the file? So if we go here, I was specifying here file name. Let me just put it like this in order to become clean code. Yeah, the file name was local date now, so the current moment that I'm recording this video, and I'm concatenating it with underscore sales.csv. So just like that. And yes, and here on our flat file item writer, right, I'm just getting, right, the output file name, okay, taking this param here that we have set it here on the job parameter using the late binding from Spring. Okay, now something I can see that we are still processing, always processing the same records. Why? So if we take a look here, we can see, so every time, even when we process a line, okay, a row, we are not updating it. So it will allow our job to reprocess it once again. So this is bad because as we can see here on our, when we go to the database, when we are selecting the records, we are specifying that it should be false. So I think after the job, after the step, okay, we need, so once we process, for example, after processing this chunk, okay, or everything that we have on our database, we need to update, right? We need to update this flag processed. We need to update this column processed, which default value is false, because we are going to end here on endless loop, infinite loop here, right? So in that order, we can solve that. So my question here is how you are going to solve it. You have different approaches. You have you can use your creativity in order to solve that. But in Spring Batch, we have some concepts called by, for example, we can just share data between steps. We can, for example, do something using listeners. So after the job or after the step, after the processor, and so on. So this is what we are going to do here. We are going to update after processing. Okay, so after writing these records, okay, in our file, right, I want to update the ones that processed, okay. So in that order, we are going to use the listeners, but you can use another approach. So let's go back to our, let's say, presentation mode, because the code gonna be better. Let me just add here, for example, the project structure. Yeah. Now, the next thing that we are going to do here, let's just create here a new package. Let's call it by listeners. just like that. And here I'm going to create our listener. So I think what we are going to do here, we can just create, for example, the sales, yeah, I think writer listeners, okay, or listener, just like that. Why? Because when we talk about the listeners in Spring Batch, we have some listeners. For example, we can have listener after in chunk, in the read, in processor, the write, the job. Okay, so we have some different listeners. We have some videos on our channel that we speak about listeners. So in that order, we are going to create a listener that we are going to use after we write the data, okay, to our destination. So in that order, it's going to receive sales ETO, and it's going to be a component. Let me just think, okay, for now, I think everything is okay. Yeah, we are going to log also some stuff here. Let's use the Self4J. Now, when we use listeners, before we had to implement this interface here. So as you can see, we have some methods, okay, before write, after write, okay, and on write error. So nowadays it's not necessary to use or to implement this interface. You can just use some annotations, but for me, I still prefer using this one. So let's just override some methods. We are going to override the method after write. So what we are going to do after write? So after we write the data, okay, to our file or our destination system, we are going to, let me say, we are going to update, okay, those records that we just wrote, okay, in our destination. So in that order, I'm just using here after write. As you can see, it will give me all the stuff. And here, I think the first thing that I would like to do here, let me just use the items, okay. I'm going to, I think, yeah, I'm going to get the items. Let me just map, okay, let me just map these items as ID, because we are going to update our sale table, the processed column. And yeah, so let me just get here, for example, sales DTO, and I'm going to use the sales ID. I'm just mapping it to ID, and I think yeah, to list, I can just collect it to list, because I'm using the Java 21. I think the Java 17 also has this one, but if you are not using, you can just use, for example, that collect and use collectors and so on. But yeah, guys, use Java 21 or Java 22. Forget about all those old versions, okay? Forget about those old versions. So here I'm gonna say, okay, items written ID, right? Or IDs, items, yeah, IDs, just like this. So we need to create our SQL statement that will allow us to update. Now here I'm just going to say SQL will be equal, just like this. And here we are going to use the update, right? Let me just add here as capital case, update sales, right? We are going to set the processed, set processed true, where here we specify the where clause, where ID, right? No, it should be, let me see here, where sale ID, so just like that, and we specify here in, and just like that, I think IDs. Yeah, now we have two options, okay? We can use, for example, here the JDBC template, which is very nice, okay? JDBC template, in order to update our rows or our table. So it should be like final. I could use here, as always, I could use here the constructor injection, as IntelliJ is suggesting me here, but for me, I like the block require ours constructor, which is the same, but yeah, less code. And yeah, so here I think this SQL statement is not very nice like this. We can use text block just like that, and here is the place that we are going to use, okay, the JDBC template, and we can just update using the SQL. But I think, yeah, I know. Once we use the in clause, okay, and yeah, the in clause should be like this. We need some stuff for JDBC template, which will allow us to, for example, use all these IDs, okay, as our SQL parameter. We need to create a SQL param source, okay, which will be we are just going to instantiate a map SQL param source just like that, and here we specify our query, so our SQL statement, okay, and yeah, and here we specify the IDs, so just like this. And yeah, so in order to use this map SQL parameter, because it's a map, right, we need to also to have the named parameter JDBC template. So in that order, let's just use here named param JDBC template, just like that, and here we instantiate the named param JDBC template just like that, and here we add our instance of JDBC template just like this. And instead of using the JDBC template itself, we are going to use here, okay, the named param JDBC template, and we are going to update, okay, using so we are going to update. So here in parameter source, my bad, it should be right the param name, guys. This here, the param name, it should be IDs just like that, this one here, right, because this is the param that we are going to pass here. And here actually we are going to use the SQL, and then we are going to use our param source, right, this one here. So this is the way that we are going to update, okay, using the in clause. And here let's just call it total yeah, total rows, just like that, rows affected, just like this. And here let's just log that info, okay, and here we say total rows affected after yeah total, yeah, let's just say total rows export, okay, just like this. And here we specify the total rows like this. So this is very simple, okay. Of course it's hard, right, to deal with JDBC template like that. And nowadays we have something new on Spring, I think Spring Framework 6, which is the JDBC client. JDBC client is very nice. I think we are going to do it with JDBC client too. I think so. But for now, yeah, as we can see, now we have here our listener. Yeah, so now let's just go back to our job config, okay? And yeah, let's just go here on our job configuration, and here on our, let's say, here on our step, right, we are going to add a listener, okay? And here, as we have here our listener, let me see, okay, sales writer listener, it's a component. So as it's a component, right, we can just, for example, inject it here. I think yeah, let's just inject it here, for example, yeah, here. So private final sales writer listener, okay, so let's just call it by sales writer listener, and let's add here on our step the listener. So just like that. And now, for example, before running our application, let's just, for example, put a breakpoint here, okay, and let's run in debug mode. So our application is starting just like that. Okay, let me just put here the logs, of course. Okay, as we can see, the database type. Okay, now if we take a look here, we have processed, right? How many items? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, I don't know anyways, but we can understand it here, right? So we have the chunk of 10. Yeah, fetch size, I think we are getting, right, 100 records and just processing. I don't this is a mess, but anyways, so if we just go here, let me just exit the presentation mode like this, okay, and let's go to our database. So here on our database, let's just, for example, select some rows like this. Okay, let's just, yeah, select. If we see here, everything is false, right? But we can, for example, select and say, okay, where processed, okay, is true, just like that. So if we run this query, of course we have lock on our database because we are getting here, right? We are in debug mode here, and let's go, it's here on the listener side. So what's happening here? So let's go, let's try to run this query here. As we can see, we have, for example, 10, right? 10 IDs. Why 10 IDs? Because this is our chunk size, okay? 10 IDs. And yeah, so if we go back here, we are preparing our statement, and here we are going to execute it. Okay, now we can see that 9 records, okay, 9 rows have been affected. So just like that, I think now if we go here on our database, let's try to take a look here. We're still having here some locks, okay, and yeah, let's just try to run it without debug mode in order to go till the end. Okay, as we can see, we exported some data based on the chunk size, on the chunk and so on, because of course we have a filter, right? We can select 10, right? But as we have filter, right, we are just, as we have filter here, we are just updating the ones that we have actually, let's say, we have an exception here. Okay, I think we can fix that, but for now, let's just take a look here and let's see. If we run the query, we will see that now we have some records, okay, that are actually set to true. Okay, so this is very nice. I think we got exception because let me just take a look here. Bad grammar, updates. Okay, yeah, I think we should only run, right, the update once, okay, if we have some records to update actually. So if it's 0, of course it will give exception. Just we just need here a if statement, just for example, let's say, yeah, we are just going to update, for example, if item, right, is empty, right? In our case is not empty, but as Uncle, I think Robert Martin, right, was telling that positive expression is better than a negative one like this. I think, of course, we could do it like that, right? And here we are going to actually, right, run our SQL like this. I even think that this one should be here outside. Yeah, of course, we still having it. Anyways, we can remake it later, but now if we just do it like that, and I think we can, for example, here just log, for example, if not. Yeah, I think instead of leaving it like that, we could just, for example, say, okay, if it's empty, right, we can just, let me put it like this, guys. I hope that you understand what I'm trying to do here. So if it's empty, we're just going to say, okay, we're just going to say, for example, log that, Okay, we are going to say, for example, no rows updated. Okay, just like that, for example. And in here we're just going to return, okay, else we do our job. Of course we could improve it, okay, better, but yeah, I think it's okay to leave it like that. And of course this method contains more than I don't know how many lines. We could refactor it. I will do it behind the scenes in order to make it better. But for now, as we can see, let's try to see if it will, for example, export the data, okay, and in the end, okay, we will not have exceptions anymore. Okay, so the last one was exported like that, and let's wait some more seconds and let's see if next time that we are going to run, okay, this next time that the trigger, okay, the schedule will trigger, the next time that we are going to fire the schedule, okay, it will give exception because we don't have nothing to update. Yeah, no rows to update. Okay, so this is just the filter because we were filtering the, I think, United States, as you can see. Okay, and yeah, now no more exception. And what can we improve here? I think, guys, you can skip this part, okay, but I really hate doing things like that. We can just say, okay, let's say update yeah, I think just like this, okay, and yeah, it's better, it's becoming better right now. Do you really want to do it with let's say the JDBC client? I don't know, but this is what we have here using the JDBC cursor item reader. Okay, it's very simple. You can still playing, guys, and you can see here our, let's go back here, refresh, okay, and where is our file? Where is our file? That's interesting. So our file has gone. Why? Now I understand that we made here something good, and I think it's, yeah, should delete if empty. Yeah, it will delete, of course. So yes, so I think this is okay. Okay, guys, just remember you could, for example, set it to false. I think the default is false. Okay, so if you just remove this one, okay, it's okay. It will not delete our file, and when you combine it with append, okay, so it will, the next time, even if we have some lines here, it will just append in the end of the file. And you can add, for example, every time like a header for a particular runtime and so on. So we are talking about the JDBC cursor item reader. We are going to move to the JDBC paging, right, item reader. But before that, I think we should always, for example, here, I don't know, add more validation, right? Objects that require non-null, for example, here, items like that, okay? So, for example, items written IDs cannot be null, okay, and you should also validate that it contains at least one element, so the size is not 0, and so on. So guys, this is just best practice, and we are running with time because this video can become very long, and I don't know if it's nice for you guys. So now let's move to our next topic. So our next topic is paging based item reader implementation, because if you remember, we were talking in the beginning of this video, I was telling you guys that we have the cursor based item reader, which is the one that we were just talking about. We have the JDBC cursor item reader. This is the one that we have implemented. We have also the Hibernate cursor item reader. This is deprecated nowadays, okay? And we have also the store procedure. So all of them are implementations of cursor-based item reader. The example that we have applied here is the JDBC cursor item reader. So now the next thing that we are going to do here is the paging item reader. So the difference, as you can see, okay, here we select like this, and here we are selecting as page. So I think before moving there, I think I can just tell you guys that, okay, let's just put, for example, here, okay, the minimum could be, for example, 100, okay, 100 record. So why I didn't put here 100? Because I'm just illustrating. I want you guys to see, okay, every single chunk, okay, being, for example, processed, okay? So here we haven't anything to update, of course, because we are just taking United States of America. But for example, in business side, right, you could, for example, okay, now that you don't need United States of America because it will be on your, let's say, it will be on your, let's say, in your database, you could, for example, I don't know, remove it or do something with that, okay? This is just an example, guys. Think about your use case and the business logic. So guys, before moving further, we can see, for example, some advantages of using this approach, which we can see this is very nice, where you can afford to keep a cursor open for a long period of time. So, for example, during the execution of batch processing, let's say the execution of your chunk, you will hold, okay, the cursor open. So it will set a lock, which is pessimist lock, into database depending on some vendors. This approach can be very useful, but don't forget that it can be a problem if the chunk size is very big. What I mean is the simple fact and a crucial fact that the cursor will be open during the process of chunk. So let's suppose that the chunk size is 2000 and the object is very big. Then it can lock the rows, okay, that represent that chunk. The rows in the database will be locked. So other threads or user of this application will not be allowed to read that portion of data. So this is very bad, right? So because during the batch processing, some other let's say some other application, if you are sharing database, right, some other application will not be allowed to read, right, the rows that we are using in the batch, and it can be very bad. Yes, but we can use another approach which can, for example, help us to improve our solution, which is by using driven query based item reader. So what does it mean? If we take a look here in the left side, we have here our select statement that select all entire row of our, let's say, table. So using driven query based approach, instead of selecting the entire row, okay, instead of selecting the entire row, we can just select the IDs. So first we select the IDs, okay, and we can just assume by selecting only the ID, we are going to have some more lightweight object. Because as I was telling you guys, that opening the cursor over extremely large data set can cause issues on database for some vendors, okay? So that's why we can use this approach. So we are going to select only the IDs, and then we are going to use, for example, the item processor to map or transform the ID into a complete object. So what I mean is, for example, here, as we can see, we have our JDBC item reader, which will only select the keys, which is the IDs, okay? Then we are going to use the item processor with help of a DAO, okay, in order to query for more, let's say, details for each ID. So this can be very nice, right? And this is just an alternative, but I'm just sharing with you guys the approach because sometimes you will not deal with a very large data set, okay? So I think we are talking too much. This is something that you can do in order to improve, okay, your cursor based item reader. And yeah, now let's move further to the next topic, which is the JDBC paging item reader. Now let's go. So for now, let's talk a bit about JDBC paging item reader. So with JDBC paging, instead of loading the entire data set into memory, it uses a technique that divides the data set into smaller chunks, which we call by pages. So let's suppose that we have here our select, let's suppose select 12. Instead of loading the entire data set in memory, no, we are going to divide them, okay, by small chunks, by small pages. That's why we call it by JDBC paging item reader, okay? So the paging is a concept that we can have in some vendors, okay? That the way that it works is just we define the page, we calculate the offset, we can use, for example, the limit or offset, okay, which are supported by many SQL database. But before moving too much into explanation, let's code a little bit, and then we are coming back to explain a little bit more about JDBC paging item reader. So let's go. So now that we are here on our IntelliJ, let me just put it on presentation mode in order to make it better for you guys. So let's see the project structure. So let's go back to our job configuration. So here on our job configuration, let's go back here. So here we have our, let's say, JDBC cursor item reader. So we don't need it anymore. Okay, I'm just going to comment this, guys. Remember, just to make it better for you guys, let me just comment it and let's remove this. So now we, instead of using, maybe I can just, for example, leave it here like this. So instead of using the JDBC cursor item reader, now we are going to use the JDBC, right, paging item reader, okay? So now let's start instantiating our reader. Yes, so now we have the JDBC paging item reader, so just like this. So let's just give it the name like this of our bin, and here we start returning, for example, let's instantiate here the new JDBC paging item reader builder, which will receive the sales DTO, and here is the place that we should start, for example, giving the name. Let's just say by sales paging reader, just like this. And here we need to specify the data source as we have here, okay? So we have injected here the data source. So this is the place that we need to get the data source. So here we have the data source. And now the next thing that we can use, for example, is the Rowmapper, because we are going to map, right, the result that we are going to get from our database into our object. So in that order, let's use the same type of Rowmapper, which in our case is data class Rowmapper. So just like this, and here we specify that it's sales info, sales DTO is our class. And yeah, so for now, I think the next thing that we need to specify, I think even before, okay, we need to specify something very special here on our JDBC paging item reader, which is the query provider. So let me just create here the query provider, which, as the name suggests, okay, the query provider is, as the name speaks for itself, the query provider is the one that we are going to use in order to provide the query, okay, to use on our JDBC paging. So in that order, I'm just going to use here the SQL paging query provider factory bin, okay. Let me just say that it's a query provider, just like this, because I don't want it to become a very big name. So here, let's instantiate our query provider. So just like this, and here we start, for example, providing some attributes. So for example, the first thing that we are going to set here is the select clause. So we are going to provide here the select clause. I think actually we can just reuse, right, this one that we have here. So in that order, let me just, for example, extract it, okay, to a constant, and let's say, okay, this is our, yeah, let's just call it by our select statement, okay, or select clause, just like this. So select clause, okay, just like this. So we have here refactoring. What I did, okay, I just extracted it. I just extracted it as a let's say constant, so we can, okay, we can reuse it anywhere. So now that we have here like this, let me see, okay, here on the query provider, I think here, yes, on the select clause, let's just use our select clause here, okay, and now we start adding, for example, some more, whoops, yeah, we start adding some more, let's say, config. For example, we need to set also from, I think, all right, I think here we have already everything, okay, okay, we can organize it later, but for now, let me just use here, let me just copy, for now, let me just copy everything that we have here, okay, not everything, but only the select without from, okay, and let's paste it here. Let's go back here on our SQL paging query provider factory bin, okay, instead of using this one here, let's just use here the select statement. So here we specified the select clause, so as we can see, like this. Then we set the from, of course we can just set it from the name of our table, right, because our table is sales, the name of our table. And next, I think we can, for example, browse a little bit, and let's use the where clause, okay, so it's also important to specify. So we are going to select where processed, okay, is equal false, so just like this. And yeah, now that we have it like that, I think the next thing that we can add here is to set the data source, okay, so we set the data source. We have here the data source and we are adding here, okay, it doesn't matter, okay, it's okay. And I think also as we are using the native query, we need to provide also the vendor. So let's just use here, for example, the database type, okay, which in our case, the database type, which is this one supported by Spring Batch, okay, we are going to use the Postgres. So we can see that we have some different database types here, but in our case, we need the Postgres, right? Because this is our database that we are using now. So as I was telling you guys, that when you are dealing with JDBC paging item reader, it's important to specify the, let's say, the keys, right? So let me just show you guys what I mean here. So let's just set sorted keys. We can use the key or sorted keys just like this. And yeah, for example, in our case, as it receives a collection, we are going to use, for example, singleton map, okay? And we are going to say, okay, the key actually is this sale, okay, sale ID, this. And for example, here we are going to say, okay, order this one, okay, use this one, Spring Batch item database, okay. We are going to order it by ascending, okay. So we are ordering it by ascending. So it's important, okay, to have a unique key constraint on the sorted key, because it will guarantee that no data is lost between execution, okay. So no data will be lost between the executions of the step or the job itself. So just read a little bit documentation but okay, let's just move forward. So I think we are fine with that. Now let's just return the query provider. So now that we have our query provider, I think, yeah, let's just annotate it as a bean also, like this. Of course, here it will be also a bean, okay? Because we can later inject it on our test it, and so on. So now here we are going to use our query provider. Of course, let me see if it this one here, and yeah, it's refusing, okay, because it needs a paging query provider. It doesn't matter. We can just, for example, say that we are going to inject here a paging query provider, just like this. Let's specify here query provider, and let's inject it like this. Okay, so actually this is a bean, right? As we have it as a bean, so I can inject it, okay, anywhere that I want, even inside another bean, because it's just a simple Spring Boot application. Now that we have our, let's say, query provider, we have the Rowmapper, right? Once we do this select statement here, we are mapping, right, our result set into our Java object. I think this is the place that we need to specify the page. So for example, if we take a look here on our presentation, we can see that we have the pages, right? The first thing that we need to do is to define the page. So defining the page determines the number of records that you want to fetch per page. As we can see here, the first page, the second, the third one. Okay, so this is typically a fixed number, such as 10, 20, 100, okay, record per page. So now let's add here our page size. I think the page size will be 4 in order to match this our presentation here. Okay, we are going to select 12 and the page size will be 4. So having it like that, we can just, for example, now set it build. Okay, guys, the chunk can be also, for example, 12, just in order to make it compatible with our presentation. And yeah, this is the place that we need to use the sales JDBC paging item reader. So as we can see, this is the configuration, very simple. Okay, the only thing that we need to add here, I think, is just providing the SQL query provider, just like this, okay, with our select statement from and where. Yeah, so I think here on our job, we need to use our sales, our sales JDBC paging item reader. Remember, JDBC paging item reader. And it also needs here, for example, let's see, the query provider. Instead of, for example, adding once again the query provider and so on, we can just, for example, say, okay, we are going to use, okay, this one here, JDBC paging item reader, because it's a bin, right? We can just go here and do something like this. Okay, let me just put here some break line in order to make it better. So we are just going to use it as argument of this function here. So then, instead of using it like that, let's just use here the item reader, just like this. Okay, guys, this is very simple because we are just referring here this bin here, we are passing in our step. So yeah, this is what we have. I think now let's test our application. Let's see if it's working properly. Yeah, so but before moving to our test, I think I don't really like here this typo. Okay, let's just rename it, okay, better, just like this. Okay, because we are not returning only the DTO. Yeah, so yeah, I think this is okay right now. The reader is sales JDBC paging item reader. Yes, I think I have my Docker is running, my database is running, as we can see here. Okay, so now let's run our application and let's see if it's working. Okay, it's working normal, and yeah, it's fine. So I think we can find a way to show you guys how it's working with pages, but actually is the same that we have in our presentation. If you are dealing with very large data set, for example, a very large object, of course our object here is very small, right? But think about a business object. If you need to return a customer has address, the address has the postcode, the customer has some, I don't know, different information, right? So if you are dealing with this kind of large object, I think the best way to do that is to use, okay, the JDBC paging item reader instead, which is this one, instead of using the JDBC cursor item reader. And we are going to see in detail, okay, but let's just rerun our application once again and let's try to see. I think we can, right now, we are using very small chunk size. Yeah, let's say the page can be 25. Yes, and here, for example, we can still playing with this, okay? So just like this, let's restart our application and let's see it processing, because it's very nice to play, okay? Just try to understand the way that you are going to use the, as we can see, okay? It's processing, it's working as expected, okay? And if we go back here, as we are exporting data, okay, we can see here on our file, which is the output file, okay, we have some countries here. And if you take a look, as I was telling you guys, we have our processor, which we are filtering all the records that we have that belongs to United States of America. So we don't need the records from USA. And yeah, that's why here in the end file, oh, okay, our job has finished because it didn't have, I think, records to process. Okay, so no records to process. The file doesn't exist anymore because here, okay, we add should delete, okay, if empty true. I think the default is false, okay, but we can just use it like that. And for example, if we run once again, okay, we will see that we will have here the output file, okay? And remember guys, go back to the beginning of this video, try to understand how we create our file name using the job parameter. As we can see here, we are using the local date now, okay? And yeah, so while this working, yeah, as we can see, we have 740 here. I think in order to see the file, I have to reload like this. Yes, as we can see, we have here the files, okay? So now the next time that it will run, okay, because it's a cron job, right? It will show us that we don't have any lines, okay, to process anymore, okay? So no rows updated like this, and as we can see, the file, okay, was not deleted. So now coming back here, guys, as we can see, we saw that we can use the cursor based, right, item reader and also the paging item reader. And we can see that both of them, they are very good, okay, to use, but it depends on some factor. For example, for memory efficiency, I prefer using the JDBC paging item reader, okay, because it fetch data in page, leading in small or smaller chunks, okay, or data set, and it will be very nice for memory, okay. And as we can see, the JDBC cursor item reader, we were talking that it keeps the cursor open and it holds the entire result set into memory, which can, for example, if you have very big, very large object, okay, you can, for example, have some error like out of memory error, okay, it's possible, okay. So instead of using this one, you can use this one in terms of memory, okay. But remember, we also talk about this approach here while using the cursor based item reader, which we can use for example, the driven query based, okay, just selecting the ID instead of selecting the entire object, okay, in result set. And yeah, I think the other aspect that I can go once again to decide, okay, the JDBC paging item reader is the fact that it's more scalable, because processing smaller data, it's let's say depending on some factor, but it's better than processing all, you know, like we have the big result set, okay, in memory and processing it, okay. Sometimes it cannot scale, and it's very bad to use multi-thread with this approach, which is the JDBC cursor item reader. So for me, in my perspective, in my own opinion, and based on my experience, I suggest you to use the JDBC paging item reader when you have and you know that you're gonna process very big, okay, object, okay. Let's say not object, but for example, if you're, let's suppose that you have that kind of let's say tables that contains too many relationship, very big structure, okay, and you have a very large volume, okay, of data, so you better use the JDBC paging item reader. So if you are just processing some small data and you know that you have some small columns, some few columns, okay, just use the JDBC cursor item reader. So guys, this video took me so long to finish it. It's very simple topic, but with some more explanation and something that you should keep in mind when to use one and when to use another. I think that you like it, and if you like, please subscribe, leave some like, okay, leave some comment, because it will help the channel, and it will motivate me more, because I'm motivated always, but it will motivate me more to do some videos. And this is just sharing, okay, I'm just sharing the knowledge with you guys. Please like, subscribe, and let's go to the next video. Bye bye.